Alright, so we're back with more biomes to talk about and look at. And again, the thing I want you guys to look for are the big general features of these biomes. So how do you know which biome it is? Look for those key features. It's an easy matching type of question you might see on a quiz or an exam. Here's a key feature, match it up to the biome that would have that feature. So we left off talking about temperate deciduous forests. This is one of Illinois' biomes. We have forests here. We don't have a lot of native original forests. A lot of them have been cut down and altered. Many of them, especially in certain areas, have been replanted. So for those familiar with the Shawnee National Forest in southern Illinois, down near Carbondale and that part of the state, a lot of that was actually planted back in the 1930s. Huge deal. We had cut down most of it, and then we rebuilt it. So that forest is 80 to 85, 90 years old. So it's not at that climax level of a climax forest or climax community, but it's maturing every year. So anyway, let's keep going with forests. If we move down the planet, move from deciduous forests towards the equatorial region of the planet, we now get into the tropical rainforests. Alright, so this is by far the most important biome on land. The rainforest contains the greatest diversity of any land biome. So nothing can compare to the amount of diversity found in the rainforest. It's estimated the rainforest holds around 50% of species of the land-based species on Earth. Okay, huge biodiversity. And the rainforest only makes up about 7% roughly of the entire land of the planet. So you got this small piece of land that has an incredible amount of diversity on it. So incredibly important. But the challenge, if you look at where the biomes are at, look at all the regions and the countries this rainforest exists in, they're primarily found in developing countries. And that's also where we are seeing the greatest human population growth. So we have a huge struggle here. How can we as a planet preserve our biodiversity in the rainforests, but also provide opportunity, resources, etc. to the people in those countries? Because in order to usually reach a developed status as a nation, you destroy a lot of your resources to get there. Consider what we've done in the United States. We've destroyed most of the native prairies, we've destroyed most of the native forests, and that's propelled us into a developed status in the world with our country and our resources. So we're scared. We don't want that to happen to the rainforest because of the diversity we would lose. Climate-wise, warm, wet, 12 hours of sunlight every day. That's year-round. All right, so about 12 hours of sunlight every day of the year. 365 days per year growing season. So the really great thing about the rainforest, there's always something, some fruit, some vegetable, something in season. Think about it in Illinois. What can we get fresh and local in November, December, January, February, March? A lot of our year, we don't have things growing because of the climate we have. But in the rainforest, there's always something growing and always something coming to becoming ripe. So it's huge producer base, just a massive productivity and highest producer base we're going to see on land. So this graph gives you a rough idea of the biodiversity in the rainforest. Let's get the highlighter. All right, so a rainforest. up here on top. Now, this term endemic species means it's the only place they're found. They're native to the rainforest. So this dark blue line here that I'm highlighting with green now, that's the rough biodiversity of amphibians, birds, mammals, and reptiles in the rainforest. That's the only place they're found. So you're looking at about 8,000 species. But then we have all these other species up here, another 13,000 species that also live in the rainforest. They may migrate down there during our winter and then come back to Illinois in the summer and then back in the winter and back in the summer. So massive, massive numbers of species live down in the rainforest. Compare that to, here are the grasslands that we have in Illinois. Here's our biodiversity. Maybe we're looking at about 3,300, 3,500, nothing close to the rainforest. All right, so big, big difference here. All right, so the key is, how do we manage and preserve rainforest biodiversity? Medicines come from it, cures for new diseases, all sorts of food, all sorts of different products. They're just an incredibly important biome to maintain. And if for no other reason, they produce a massive amount of oxygen. 365 days of the year, the rainforest is making oxygen. Consider Illinois. Our oxygen production shuts down probably by early to mid-October. And then you have November, December, January, February, March, most of March before anything starts running photosynthesis again. So you have 5 to 6 months in Illinois where we do not make oxygen, yet we're breathing it. Things to consider. Okay, so let's go to another biome. This is called the shrublands. Now this is for the most part, a small biome geographically. It's kind of scattered around the globe. Shrublands are also known as chaparral. So it's another name that will be used for shrublands. And the key feature here is that all the species that live in shrublands or chaparral all of the species are adapted to fires. Okay? So shrublands tend to experience hot and dry summers and then wet winters. Now the challenge is it gets so hot and dry in the summer, the stuff can catch on fire. There's relatively few trees. It's going to be mostly shrubs that we find in chaparral. So all these plants are adapted to being burned. The animals are adapted to being burned. The plants, many of the seeds, need fire to germinate. If the seed's going to actually germinate and the plant's going to grow, it needs to be burned, and that breaks the seed coat and allows it to germinate and to grow. Most of the animals, they will burrow and hide from the fire, or they'll leave when the fire comes through. And then after the fire's gone, the animals kind of make their way back into the chaparral region and access their habitat. So shrubland, chaparral, small regions, but very unique ones. Again, these are all coastal. So you consider the Mediterranean, part of Western California, or West Coast down in California, tip of Australia or Africa, some parts of Australia there, a little bit of West Coast of South America. So they have that season of hot and dry summers, wet winters, and a lot of that is due to the ocean currents and the air flow coming off the oceans that create this hot, dry summer and these wet winters. Okay, so our second Illinois biome, the prairie. This is what we're known for in Illinois. We're also a prairie biome. Prairies are generally located between deserts and forests. So they're too much moisture, too much rainfall to be a desert, but not enough rainfall to support trees and grow forest. So they're kind of that in-between biome. The soil is often very fertile. So it's ideal for growing lots and lots of grasses. All right, so the producer base of a prairie tends to be a lot of grasses and different what we call prairie flowers. Often we look at them as weeds. Big diversity, big producer base. But what we see happening though is the consumers are primarily grazing animals, the herbivores. So most of the animals that consume food in the prairie tend to be bison, antelope, deer, things like that. Think about your prairie animals. Now we do have other prairie animals. The smaller ones tend to burrow in the prairie, or they live on the edge of the prairie in the forest and kind of transition back and forth. But sadly, most prairie biomes have been converted into agricultural lands. That's the frustrating part about the prairie, is most of it's been converted. We don't have much native prairie left in Illinois anymore. It's hard to find, here's an original patch of prairie. We are restoring spots. There are prairie patches that are being restored, which is fantastic, but it's not the native prairie that we had hundreds of years ago when we first settled Illinois. So another unique biome, the edge of the prairie where it meets the other biomes is constantly shifting, adjusting, and moving. The forest will start growing into the prairie. Sometimes a fire will come through and kind of burn it back. And it all just kind of moves and shifts and adjusts based on the climate and the abiotic factors. Now, the southern hemisphere has a comparable version of the prairie. It's what we call the savanna. So this is the southern version of the prairie, southern hemisphere version of prairie. Same concept. Large grazing animals, these herds migrate around. Yep. We got the wildebeest, you have the zebras, giraffes, that kind of stuff in the savanna. These guys are migrating around. Grass itself, large diversity of grasses. Grass itself doesn't have a lot of nutrients in it, and you got to chew it up, digest it, and digest it, and digest it. This is why grazing animals are constantly moving around and grazing, because they can't get a lot of nutrients from one spot in the grass. So they have to have large territories, large ranges to get enough calories. This is often what drives the migration of many of these animals, that along with where is water available. So again, the savanna, that is the southern hemisphere version of the prairies. Okay, the last land biome to talk about is the desert. Now, the desert is characterized as being hot and dry. Yes, some deserts, though, cold and dry. We have deserts that it gets very, very cold, but very, very dry. The life is adapted to almost no water. So everything living in the desert, from the producer base on up, has physical and physiological and even behavioral adaptations to dealing with minimal amounts of water available. So some deserts will get less than 3 inches of rain in the course of a year. I mean, some deserts have been recorded to go for years without rainfall. So there's a very limited biodiversity. There is biodiversity, but it all revolves around the rain. So when the rain happens, that seasonal rain or that every couple of year rain, that's when the life in the desert explodes, plants reproduce, animals reproduce, and then they go back to just struggling through life with very minimal amounts of water. So we've covered all the land biomes I want you guys to learn about. In the next lecture, we're going to start talking about aquatic biomes. So the aquatic communities and biomes connect to the land. It's all tied together, and everything influences each other. So we'll check aquatic biomes out in our next part in the lectures.